Chapter 9. Advaita. Sri Bhagavan was not a philosopher, and there was absolutely no development in his teaching. His earliest expositions, self-inquiry, and who am I, are no different in doctrinal theory from those he gave verbally in his last years. When, as a lad of 16, he realized his identity with the Absolute, with that which is pure being underlying all that is, it was formless, intuitive knowledge, of which the doctrinal implications were recognized only later. As he said, "I did not yet know that there was an essence or impersonal real underlying everything, and that God and I were both identical with it." Later, at Tiruvannamalai, as I listened to the Ribu Gita and other sacred books, I learnt all this and found that they were analyzing and naming what I had felt intuitively without analysis or name. It was no question of opinions, but of truth recognized. That is to say that he was not convinced by what he read, but simply recognized its conformity with what he already intuitively knew through direct experience. All modes and levels of doctrine are comprised within Hinduism, all of them legitimate and corresponding to various modes of approach required by people of varying temperament and development. The approach through love and worship of a personal God exists, as it does in the Western or Semitic religions. So also does the approach through service, seeing God manifested in all his creatures and worshiping him by serving them. However, the recognition of pure being as oneself and the self of the universe and of all beings is the supreme and ultimate truth, transcending all other levels of doctrine without denying their truth on their own plane or level. This is the doctrine of Advaita, non-duality, taught by the ancient rishis and preeminently by Shankaracharya. It is the simplest as well as the most profound, being the ultimate truth beyond all the complexities of cosmology. Non-duality means that only the Absolute is. The entire cosmos exists within the Absolute, having no intrinsic reality, but merely manifesting the Absolute, which, however, remains eternally unchanged and unmanifest, as the people and events in a man's dream exist within him and have no reality apart from him, and yet add nothing to him by their creation and subtract nothing from him by their disappearance. This means that the Absolute is the self of the cosmos and of every being. Therefore, by seeking his self, by the constant investigation, who am I? It is possible for a man to realize his identity with universal being. It was the purest Advaita that Sri Bhagavan taught. Some may fear that the doctrine of the one self deprives them of a personal God to whom they can pray. But there is no need for such fear, because as long as the reality of the ego who prays endures, so long does the reality of the God to whom he prays. So long as a man accepts his ego as a reality, the world outside it and God above it are also realities for him. This is the level of a dualistic religion and a personal God. It is true, but not the ultimate truth. As Bhagavan said, all religions postulate the three fundamentals: individual, God, and world. It is only so long as the ego endures that one says either the one manifests itself as the three, or the three are really three. The supreme state is to inhere in the self, and then the ego is extinguished. Some people also revolt against the conception of the world as unreal, even while admitting the reality of the spirit. But that is because they have not understood in what sense it is unreal. Sri Bhagavan often explained this, and nowhere more concisely than in the following statement recorded by S.S. Cohen. Shankaracharya has been criticized for his philosophy of Maya, or illusion, without understanding his meaning. He made three statements: that Brahman as absolute pure consciousness is real, that the universe is unreal, and that Brahman is the universe. He did not stop with the second. The third statement explains the first two. It signifies that when the universe is perceived apart from Brahman, that perception is false and illusory. What it amounts to is that phenomena are real when experienced as the self, and illusory when seen apart from the self. The teaching of Sri Bhagavan was intensely practical. He expounded theory only in answer to the specific needs and questions of devotees, and as a necessary basis for practice. When reminded once, as in the Maharshi's Gospel, that Buddha had refused to answer questions about God, he replied with approval. In fact, Buddha was more concerned with directing the seeker to realize bliss here and now than with academic discussions about God and so forth. So also Bhagavan himself would often refuse to gratify curiosity, turning the questioner instead to the need for sadhana or spiritual effort. Asked about the posthumous state of man, he might reply, "Why do you want to know what you will be when you die before you know what you are now? First, find out what you are now." A man is now and eternally the deathless self behind this and every other life. But to be told so or to believe it is not enough. It is necessary to strive to realize it. Similarly, if asked about God, Bhagavan might reply, "Why do you want to know about God before you know yourself? First, find out what you are." The process by which this is to be done is described in a later chapter, but since the next chapter already recounts Sri Bhagavan's instructions to devotees, reference is made to it and to his teaching here. That Bhagavan's teaching was not philosophy in the usual sense of the term may be seen from the fact that, as will appear in his replies to Shiva Praksam Pillai in the next chapter, he did not instruct his devotees to think out problems, but to eliminate thought. This may sound as though the process is stupefying, But as he explained to Paul Brunton in the conversation quoted in Chapter 2, the reverse is true. A man is identical with the self, which is pure being, pure consciousness, pure bliss. But the mind creates the illusion of a separate individuality. In deep sleep, the mind is stilled and a man is one with the self, but in an unconscious way. In samadhi or meditative absorption, he is one with the self in a fully conscious way, not in darkness, but in light. If the interference of the mind is stilled, the consciousness of self can, by the grace of the Guru, awaken in the heart, thus preparing for this blissful identity, for a state that is not torpor or ignorance, but radiant. Knowledge, pure I amness. Many may recoil from the idea of destruction of the mind, or what comes to the same thing, of the separate individuality, and find it terrifying. And yet it happens to us daily in sleep, and far from being afraid to go to sleep, we find it desirable and pleasant, even though in sleep the mind is stilled only in an ignorant way. In rapture or ecstasy, on the other hand, the mind is momentarily absorbed and stilled in a fragmentary experience of the bliss that is its true nature. The very words indicate the transcending of the individuality, since rapture means etymologically being carried away, and ecstasy means standing outside oneself. The expression, "it is breathtaking," really means it is thought-taking, for the source of thought and breath is the same, as Sri Bhagavan explained when speaking of breath control. The truth is that the individuality is not lost, but expanded to infinity. The elimination of thoughts is for the purpose of concentrating on the deeper awareness that is behind and beyond thought. Far from weakening the mind, it strengthens it, for it teaches concentration and one-pointedness. Sri Bhagavan frequently confirmed this. It is the weak and uncontrolled mind that is constantly distracted by irrelevant thoughts and harassed by unhelpful worries. The mind that is strong enough to concentrate and be one-pointed, no matter on what, can turn its concentration to the elimination of thoughts in quest of the self. And conversely, the effort to eliminate thoughts in the manner prescribed gives strength and power of concentration. When the quest is achieved, the faculties of the mind are not lost. Sri Bhagavan illustrated this by comparing the mind of the jnani to the moon in the sky at midday. It is illuminated by its light and not needed in the greater radiance of the sun, which illuminates it.